on Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.
You're listening to The Jan Price Show, and today my guests are two-time Academy Award-winning filmmaker, director Barbara Kopple, and former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Iran, John Limbert. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my honor to have you both here. We're going to talk about your brand new documentary, Desert One, which is about the heroic rescue of the hostages back in 1980. Can you tell us a little bit, Barbara, what attracted you to this particular story?
Well, for me, Desert One is a story that I just felt needed to be told because many people have forgotten it in history. And it was also for me a story of heroicism and a reminder of the horrors of war and the roots of conflict between the U.S. and the Iranian governments. And the History Channel wanted to do, 100 films on history that people really hadn't remembered or were pushed under the rug or whatever. And so this was the one that we wanted to do very much. So that was the origins of it.
And then how did you connect with John and some of the other hostages for this film?
Well, John was one of the terrific people who was willing to talk to us. He invited us to his home. He's married to an Iranian woman. And they fixed us, they ordered in a lunch, an Iranian lunch that was just so delicious. And it just put us in the total right place that we wanted to be. We felt so comfortable. And he's so brilliant and full of stories. And he's a historian in his own right and an ambassador and has just finished his own novel right now. It's just
Exciting. How exciting. John, so tell us a little bit about, well, there's a lot of things. I had so many questions, but again, you were one of the hostages. Well, tell us a little bit about that experience and then, and then also how you found out about this dramatic rescue that was attempted and obviously did not take place. But tell us a little bit about what was going on for you during this time period.
Well, first of all, let me thank Barbara for her kind words. She called me about participating in this film, and there had been a lot of documentaries made and a couple of feature films, although not focused like this on the rescue mission. But I must say she was extremely persuasive. In terms of getting people to participate, not just me, but as you see throughout the film. I mean, this happened 40 years ago. It's hard to believe that it's been so long. But it is a part of history, and risks being either forgotten. Or, as perhaps more often happens, misread.
Yes. I mean, you're right. I mean, it is hard to believe that it's been 40 years ago. What lessons do you think we've learned in those 40 years? John? Tough question.
I'd like to be an optimist. I was in the field of diplomacy for about 35 years, and you have to be an optimist there. But it's really hard to see that we've learned much beyond the fact that international relations, diplomacy, it's very hard, and it takes patience, it takes forbearance, it takes a willingness to fail, it takes a willingness to listen, all the things that are not in very great supply right now in our so-called diplomatic establishment.
Mm-hmm. This is very true. Very true. What was going on for all of you? I mean, there was 54 of you who were held hostage. Is that how many there were? I can't remember. 54. What was going on for you when this all took place? I mean, did you have any idea? I mean, was it 444 days that you were held hostage?
Jan, we were held for 14 months, 444 days. We were captured in early November of 79, and the rescue mission took place in late April of 1980. So we had been in captivity for about 6 months, and we didn't have much contact with the outside world, almost none. But it was obvious that whatever efforts had been made on our behalf, they weren't working. I mean, we were still in captivity 6 months in. We didn't know about the mission. We didn't know the mission had taken place, but we did know that the whole episode was getting to a crisis point. I mean, you could tell. There had been a UN effort in February and March of 1980, which had to get us out. When that had failed, so we did not know what had happened, but in late April, we were told, pack up your things, we're moving, and we're moving far. Be ready for a long move. And we were scattered around the country. I ended up in the town of Esfahan, which is about 6-7 hours south of Tehran. Didn't know why until a week or so later, when I was able to steal a newspaper that the students had left out, and found out just some bare bone facts, that there had been a mission and that it had failed and that there had been American casualties.
So how did you feel about that when you read about that?
Two things. One, obviously, very disappointed that it hadn't been successful and that we were still in captivity. But also, and very, very proud of our people who were willing to try that, and also realizing that people were we were not forgotten, and that people were willing to take a tremendous risk for our sake and for the sake of our freedom.
Yes. So, Barbara, for you, when you gathered together many of the people that were not only involved in the mission, but also some of the hostages. So how was that process for you to be able to get so many people involved in this film? This is a gut-wrenching film, by the way. It really is. It's heart-wrenching. I mean, it's beautifully done, beautifully put together, I must say, the way you have done this, and also with the new animation that kind of brings us closer to what actually happened. And some of the photos, how did you get access to some of the photos that you did for this film, and some of the video that you had?
Right. Well, being able to film people who were hostages as well as people who were on the mission. Everybody that we filmed just told the most amazing stories. For example, one of our hostages, Kevin Hermeling, he was the youngest. He was a Marine, and he was going to Tehran, and he had never even heard of Tehran ever in his life. And here he was going to protect the embassy in the middle of a revolution, and he was held. And then one day the guards came into his room and they took off his handcuffs, they took off his blindfold, and they walked him into a room with a couch. And he heard a rustling at the door. The door opened, and he said, it was my mom. And his mother, Barbara Tim, had come all the way from the Midwest to see her son. She got her permits, she did everything, and he was overjoyed. But what he wanted to know is, how are they getting us out? What's going to happen to us? And she could only talk about, sports and personal things, because they were being mic'd the entire time. So each person had a phenomenal story that they shared with us. throughout the film, getting the videos and the archival material and doing the animation. The animation was done by an Iranian who was just incredible, Zartosh. And he lived in America, but he knew the topography and he knew so much about Iran and he knew about this story. And our great team of Eric Foreman and Dave Cassidy and everybody at Cabin Creek Films got pictures, and we just stretched ourselves so far to be able to get materials that you've never heard before. For example, we had audio tapes that were phenomenal that nobody had ever heard before, because the mission was a mission where it was totally silent. Nobody could know what was happening. And of course, there was no footage. And so we got President Carter and Vice President Mondale talking to the generals about what happened from the very beginning until the end. And it was almost as if you were seeing history unfold. You were living history and listening to it. So it was quite miraculous. Getting to know all of these people, for me, they're all heroes, because they're people who would give up their lives, give up everything to be able to save Americans, to be able to do what they felt was right, even if they thought, the mission wasn't going to be as good as they wanted because it was so many moving parts. They were game. This is who they were, what they're about, and what they're trained for.
Absolutely amazing. And President Carter, you had the honor, I'm sure, of interviewing President Jimmy Carter. I've met him a couple of times. I lived in Atlanta for a period of time. And when I lived there, I wanted to absorb everything about the culture in Atlanta. And I visited the Carter Presidential Library on numerous occasions, but I also went down to Plains, Georgia, where at the time he was teaching Sunday school.
Yeah,
Did you know that?
Still is. He's
still doing it? Oh my goodness, he's 95 years old and he's still doing it. And I went down a couple of times. Now Plains is, I'm sure it's the same. At the time, I think they had one little blinking light in the middle of town, and you go like, how did somebody become president from this little town?
Right.
And it was quite a while. 96 Olympics is when I worked for the Olympics in 96 in Atlanta. And so I went down a couple times. He wouldn't sign autographs, but he would let you take pictures with him, he and Rosalind. And it was such an honor. I enjoyed it so much. I actually went down a second time, and I've met him at other times too. He's such an amazingly wonderful, caring man. And I felt that when you watched him in this film, you really see how difficult this was. So what was your experience of interviewing President Jimmy Carter for this film?
Well, it wasn't easy to get an interview with him. No, I had to, it took 3 months, and I had to call the Carter Center and speak to a man named Philip Wise, who never answered his phone, but had his answering machine, and he would go, "Howdy, this is Phil Wise." And so I decided to have a relationship with his answering machine, because I figured one day he'd listen to it all, and I would tell him, this is what I'm filming, and this is why we need President Carter. And I'd call him maybe every 3 days for 3 months. I also had 2 friends calling him too. One was Bernie Aronson, who was the speechwriter for Mondale, and one was Jerry Rashun, who handled President Carter's campaign. So they also helped. And then finally, one day, I got a phone call, and this guy said, "Hi, this is Phil Wise." And I went, "Whoa, I would know you anywhere." And he said, "Okay, Barbara, you can come and film." So I went to the Carter Center. I didn't get to go to Plains, and they gave me 20 minutes. It was on Valentine's Day, so I'll never forget it. So I bought the best chocolate I could for him, and I bought a necklace that I had gotten in South Sudan, a red heart necklace for the First Lady. And I sat down, and I was so honored to be there with him. And I knew that this was a very, very tough subject for him, because it's the one thing that, he feels in his life that he lost, that he didn't do well on. And he just talked about it with such dignity. And he talked about how he lost his father and how heartbreaking that was for him. And he never thought that he would feel that sad again. But when the men were lost on the mission, he felt that same terrible, terrible pain. So it was a wonderful interview. It was really something I will remember for the rest of my life.
Oh yes, yes, and I'm this film, that be able to have had him part of this of Desert One, of this wonderful documentary, and to just really hear how his words and speaking. I mean, of course, the other archival footage that you had, or the video, the audio that you have as it was going on, is invaluable. But to have her perspective on it even more, and then Vice President Mondale, was it easier to get him?
Very. He was wonderful. He didn't want us to leave.
Aww.
I got, less than 20 minutes with President Carter, and I think I got 2 hours with Vice President Mondale. Yeah, it was wonderful. He was wonderful. Kind and, just so glad that we were there and we were interested. And he really told a good story because he was one of the first vice presidents that really had, was involved in foreign policy. So he knew a lot.
How wonderful. So, John, for you, you've been backed. Did you become an ambassador? You became the U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Iran. Was that after, or was that the position you held when you were held as a hostage?
No, Jan. When I was in Tehran, it was, I think, my third Foreign Service assignment. I was a relatively junior Foreign Service officer at the embassy, and after we came out in 1981, in 1981, I went on and served in the department for about 26 years after that. It was probably one result of that experience was a commitment to the whole process of diplomacy, because we had all seen close up what happens when the process breaks down, and the alternative to some orderly way of dealing with other countries, even countries that you disagree with, is extremely unpleasant and extremely dangerous. So I was probably more committed to that career after 1981 than I ever had been.
Wow, that's interesting. You would think you would not want to go back and not be a part of this after your experience, but it was the opposite for you.
It was the opposite for me, and I think most of my colleagues felt the same way. Most of us did not leave the service. One or two did, but most did. But most did not. And there were a few of us who spent much of our career and our post Foreign Service career to this idea that there should be some better way of the U.S. and Iran dealing with each other
Mm-hmm.
than just by yelling at each other and by threats and by name calling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good advice for no matter what time of era we're living in, but even more so right now. I think it's very important advice that we need.
Right now, it's a hard road. It's a pretty hard road to hoe, I must say.
I agree. So, did you all of you that were held together as hostages, have you all stayed in touch with each other through the years, or did the relationships? Is there a bonding experience because of the shared experience, or was it difficult to stay connected with everyone?
Not really, Jan, because first of all, we were a very diverse group. I mean, we had diplomats, Foreign Service officers of all all ranks and ages. We had young Marine Guards like Kevin Hermaning and others. We had military officers. We had some technical people, communications officers. So we were a pretty diverse group. And also people went their own ways. People went to follow different careers. Some stayed in the military. Some left the military. And we have I'm not giving away any secrets. I think we have a great diversity of outlooks and philosophies about the world and about international relations, which we agree if we do get together. And unfortunately, when we do, mostly it's for memorial services now. But if we do, there's an unspoken agreement not to talk about those things.
Okay, I understood. Yeah, very much understood. Barbara, you had an Iranian crew of all women for this. So tell me a little bit about that. That's unusual in its own right there.
Well, yes, they're remarkable young women, and they were extremely helpful and generous with their time and spirit. And they are the ones that, found the 11-year-old boy.
Yes, I want to talk about that. Go ahead, please.
Who was on a bus and who, became a witness to what happened. And the mission had landed in a place that, nobody thought that there weren't any, roads or highways, and they thought that they were very remote, but they weren't. And lots of buses and fuel trucks and other things came up at night. And so this family took this bus every year and had a big family vacation. And we got to hear through this 11-year-old boy's sensibilities, even though he's a grown man now, it still seems as if he's doing it through the eyes of when he was 11, talking about what the experience was for him and hoping beyond hope that they would all get out alive, and that he would particularly get out alive so he could go to his friends at class and tell them about this extraordinary experience.
It is amazing. Also that you talked to some of the students, the Iranian students who were involved in this. How did you get in touch with some of them? I mean, you had an Iranian woman. I can't remember her name.
Yes, she wasn't a student. She was with the Revolutionary Guard. Well, I guess she was a student at that time, and she's with the Revolutionary Guard. These were all people that wanted to be filmed because we got, our passes and everything to be able to do it. And we were given some people who really wanted to talk. So she was one of them.
Well, this is just an absolutely wonderful, wonderful documentary, Desert One. Where can people see this film, Barbara?
Well, this film has shown at many film festivals, and we've been able to bring, the people who are hostages and on the mission together to come onto the stage. And on August 21st, this will be in 70 outlets around the United States, digital media, unless theaters are open, and the number is growing, so it could be 100. So you could see it from anywhere, LA, Eugene, Oregon, New York, you name it. So it's big release.
I highly recommend everyone find Desert One. It's just a magnificent documentary. It's heart-wrenching, and it's just beautifully done. And John and Barbara, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been my honor to have you both on the show.
Oh,
and I wish you much success. You're welcome.
It's our honor to be on your show. Thank you,
Jen.
Thank you. If you have missed any of the Jan Price shows, that you can listen anywhere, anytime on thejanpriceshow.com and on the iHeart Podcast Network, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play. And please go to my Facebook page and like The Jan Price Show. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter at The Jan Price Show. Thank you for listening.
on Power Talk AM 1460 and FM 101.1. Streaming worldwide on iHeartRadio. Jan Price talks to the movers and shakers in the film business. The Jan Price Show.